Well, actually, the two clocks are saying the same time. That's unusual. In the 5 years I've looked at those clocks, they never agreed. Thank you all for coming. We are very happy tonight to have Stuart Elway to talk to us about polling. I learned in the course of inviting Stuart for our Talking Public Affairs Committee that he is a longstanding friend and colleague of our neighbor Neil McReynolds. And so Neil is going to do the introduction. But Neil, before you get up, I want to tell you that I broke in as a cub reporter in 1967 at the Centralia Daily Chronicle. And in those days, the Evans administration, Governor Dan Evans, was in his first term. And one of the good reputations that they had was because of the press officer, Neil McReynolds. And over the years, I will tell you that that's a very difficult job. And Neil brought integrity and honesty to the communications of that administration, which lasted 12 years. And so we are very fortunate to have a man of his stature and integrity. Neil, come on up and introduce.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Sam, for those nice words. Appreciate that. Well, I'm very pleased this evening to have the opportunity to introduce Stu Elway, a person I worked with, Governor Dan Evans' office many years ago, and we've stayed in touch over the years. It's been a special relationship there. So delighted to have Stu here tonight. Stu joined the governor's staff as a summer intern, and then became a special assistant to the governor. And he took calls and visits and answered letters from citizens, as well as serving as a liaison with youth and environmental organizations. And he provided support for the rest of us in the governor's office. I'll tell you, Stu provided assistance and help to me over the years and other staff, and he really had a big factor in making things work there in the governor's office. So Stu got into measuring and analyzing public opinion, and that's what he's here to talk to us tonight. During those 50 plus years that followed, he conducted hundreds of research projects locally and around the country for a wide variety of organizations, from large and small business to nonprofits and public agencies. Locally, he's best known for the Seattle Times poll. He did that for 16 years, the Seattle Times, and for starting the Elway poll in 1992, which eventually became the Cascade PBS poll. He's been featured in his work. He and his work have been featured in magazines, both as he appeared in. He also appeared in television networks, all three of them. And he's been quoted in nearly every major newspaper in the United States. He has a PhD in communications and has taught in graduate schools. I asked Stu for a copy of his standard resume for introducing him this evening, and he attached a note to the resume saying, "I left out the part about being a homeroom sergeant of arms at the 7th grade." Without his background and his light touch, it'd be a great deal of pleasure to introduce Stuart Elway.
Thank you, Neil. I've got to get my, I think I'm on. I got to get my words out here, my text. So thank you for coming. It's an honor to be here. I have seen the list of other people that have appeared in this forum, and I'm honored to be among them. I'm also honored to be among you, the highest voting precinct in King County. That's right. So I've been a little worried about this because it's a very sophisticated audience I'm going to be talking to. And also because it's people with institutional memory of the things I'm going to be talking about. Because the last few groups I've talked to, everybody's so damn young. So if this is comfortable. So we have been, I'm going to talk about red and blue in the Evergreen State. We have been 2 generations now since Washington voted for a Republican for either governor or president. So I'm going to review the history of Washington's road from being a purple state, which it was, to a reliably Democratic state. I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over the Peloponnesian War and get right to it. But it wasn't always like this. These are the votes for presidents from 1964 to 1984. From 56 to 84, Washington split its ticket, Republican, Democrat, governor, president, in 6 out of those 8 elections. So I start my chart here in 64. We voted for LBJ, then Humphrey, then 4 straight Republicans. Then in 1988, we switched from Reagan to Dukakis without spraining our backs, and have never looked back. As late as 2000, Washington was still on the long list, at least, of battleground states. George Bush campaigned here early in the year and then left for Ohio later in the year. But at the start of that year, Washington was considered a swing state. So the last GOP president was 1984. So here's the governor's race from 64. Again, we split the tickets further on in 64, 68, 76, and 84. 84 was also the last Republican governor who left office. That was John Spellman, who was elected in 1980. So a third of the electorate today was not born the last time we had a Republican senator, governor, or voted for president in this state. So the state elective officers, we elect eight elective offices in this state, besides governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, a couple of commissioners, treasurer, that sort of thing. From 1980 to 1988, the Republicans won 14 of those races, and Democrats won 10. In 88, that was the year we voted for Dukakis and Booth Gardner for governor, and yet 5 statewide officials elected were Republicans. So in those 4 years, 14 Republicans. Since then, the Republicans have elected another 14. Meanwhile, the Democrats have elected 58 or 58 of those races, of the 72 races. We join 41 states in the country that have single-party control, top to bottom, both houses of the legislature, in one party or another. There are 23 all red states, from governor to the House of Representatives, plus all these people in between, and there are 18 Democratic states. There are only 3 that have a genuine balance or mix. Those are Arizona, Nevada, and North Carolina. And of course, our congressional district has gone from 5 to 4 Republican, or 5 to 4 Democrat, to now 8 to 2 Democrat. So underlying the votes that we're talking about is party identification. And of course, in Washington State, we don't register by party. The only time you have to declare your political party is when I call you on the phone and ask you as part of one of my polls. So independent has been as much an attitude as it has been a defining characteristic of Washington voters. And so, as I say, the only time is when I call you and ask you on the phone, which I did every month from 1992 to 2025, which results in, and the way I ask the question is, if you did have to register by party vote, would you register as a Democrat, Republican, or Independent? This is my favorite chart. As you can clearly see, political identification is somewhat of a variable in Washington State. But there is a pattern. if you average over administrations, this is the chart you get. So I took the average of all of that previous chart from 1992 to 2025. So for the entire time of the 90s, I get it. Oh, look, see? Oh, you see that? A little fly there? Okay. We had parity. It was a 2-point difference. The average for 10 years or 8 years there was 2 points and the difference between Republicans and Democrats. As a matter of fact, going into the 2000 election, Republicans had a 1-point advantage all that year. But then it's been widening ever since then, from R+2 or a D+2 in the 90s to Democrat +16 in 2024. So so these are total administrations. So we only have a couple of readings of Trump. They're up there in the corner, and it expanded even further. I used to say in 2020 there that George Bush was very good for the Democratic Party in Washington State, because that's when things started to separate. The seeds of change, but Trump's even better for the Democrats here. The seeds of change, this change, were planted in the 1990s. In 1988, and I said we went from Reagan to Dukakis from 84 to 88. The Republican State Committee sent a delegation to the National Convention to vote for Pat Robertson against H.W. Bush in that year. And we haven't voted for a Republican since. I don't think that's a coincidence. In 1992, Pat Buchanan declared the culture war at the Republican National Convention. And Republicans have been losing that war in Washington State ever since. In 1994, the Gingrich Revolution had some success here. The contract with America, Washington's congressional delegation swung further toward the Republicans than any delegation in the country, but has since swung all the way back. But in addition to that contract with America, Gingrich introduced to American politics a scorched earth strategy of demonizing your opponents. His strategy, he told all of his candidates to you call the Democrats traitors and danger to America, and it worked. He got the first Republican majority in Congress in 40 years. Then in 2000, Karl Rove, who was running W. Bush's campaign, changed the strategy to, in the before times, candidates would run in their parties to where they had to go, and then during in the general election, they would move to the center to try to capture the swing voters and the independents and softer voters, and which is where the majority would be, keeping their voters. So you run to the center. Rove tipped that on its head and introduced a play to the base strategy. So his idea was, we're going to juice the turnout among Republicans and depress it among Democrats. So it was sort of a continuation of the Gingrich strategy of demonizing the opponents. So Gingrich and Bush both won. So naturally, they were imitated in future elections. But here in Washington, 2000 is when the party identification started to split, and not in the Republican favor. So the question, as I say, how would you register if you had to register by party in Washington State? This was the question in January of 24, so the dawn of the last presidential, of the presidential election year, the first month of the year. 42% Republican, a Democrat, 26 Republican, 32 Independent. In that spaghetti chart I showed you, those of you who look carefully could tell that throughout most of that time, the Democrats and independents were sort of trading places as at the top, and the Republicans were sort of trending down. Well, and going into 24, the Democrats were clearly ahead. So, but this time I followed it up with a question: how do you typically vote? And so they split the independents relatively evenly, but the Democrats picked up a couple of points on the Republicans. So we had a voting, essentially an effective voting majority going into that election of 54 to 37 favoring the Democrats. So there's that 54 to 37 party ID. This is the vote for all the statewide elections that year. So we got Senate, Secretary of State, Auditor, President, Treasurer, all down the line. The one in the middle, I'll get this one here is the congressional total. So that's all the votes for all the congressional candidates across the state. And over here is the state House legislature total, all the votes for all the legislators. So everybody gets 2 votes in that race because there's 2 legislators, 2 House members in every vote, and then the Lands Commission at the end. So several things to notice about this chart. First, that's very striking, is the uniformity, which indicates party voting. Not much differentiation between the candidates. Everybody's within 6% of each other for each party, except for Jamie Herrera Butler, Lands Commissioner at the end there, who was the best performing Republican. So here is a fairly well known defeated incumbent, but had been a Congress member from Washington State, voted for Trump's impeachment, which is why she was a former Congress member. But she was well known across the state for that, running against Dave Upthegrove, a relatively unknown King County councilman. I mean, not known outside of King County by much. And yet she loses to him by 6 points. So people were voting largely along the lines that they said they were voting in January. You run the whole campaign, and the numbers come out pretty close to the same at the end. And also notice that Donald Trump, every candidate on the ballot outperformed Donald Trump in Washington State in 24. So this indicates a little more party voting than we kind of think we have here in Washington. So underlying those party votes is partisan identification. Alan Abramowitz published this book in 2018. He studied decades of national political election results and found this sorting that I'm going to talk about. In the olden days, both parties were big tents. They each contained various interests and issue positions, and most of the contentious issues got worked out in the parties, and then the party faithful would more or less band together behind their candidate in the general election. It wasn't quite that stark, but that's pretty much how it worked. There used to be liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats and moderates in both parties and progressives, and they'd hash that out in the parties. So what Abramowitz found is that we are more divided now than ever by geography, gender, education, race, age, ideology in ways we never have been before. People had what the political scientists like to call cross-cutting cleavages, which is you belong to different groups. You're in a different religion, ethnicity, association, neighborhoods. So you might be a Democrat and I'm a Republican, but we meet at the Elks Club. Or you're a Catholic and I'm a Protestant, but our kids go, to the same school and we see each other. All of these different loyalties divide people's loyalties and create overlapping interests. And that's the space where compromise can take place. I'm a Republican, but you're a fellow member of the Eagles, so we can talk or whatever those overlaps are. In the 1960s, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, Vietnam War, environmental movement, began to divide people along demographic lines, age, gender, ethnicity, things that I don't have any control over. That's who I am. It's my identity and education. And these loyalties have sorted themselves, as Abramowitz found, as never before. So importantly, identity is now sorted, extraordinarily sorted. Race, gender, religion, it's not just party affiliation or policy preferences, it's identity. These are not entirely new ideas, but the degree to which the separation they have sorted into the two parties is new. There was a time when politics did not define one's identity. But now we're at a place where it's not, it's gone from being, partisanship has gone from being a preference to being an identity to being a dominant identity. More people today would be upset if their offspring married someone from a different race than from a different party. The other way around? It's the other way around. Different party than from a different race, which is, compared to some years ago, quite a change. So these developments start to explain why everything seems political and why politics is so polarized. We see it here in Washington State. Oh, I was supposed to be hitting my little bars here. See? There you are. Okay. Got to remember to put the cues on the text. So here in Washington, you can go now. In the last 10 years, people under 50 years old, in 2000, it was 2-point difference. It swung a net 25 points toward the Democrats among people under 50 between 20 and 24. The Democrats gained 10, Republicans lost 15 points in my polling. Among women, the gender gap has been here for a long time, but it gained a net 13 points in the last generation. In King County, it's gone 21 points. And this is King County outside of Seattle. This is what we used to call suburban and rural King County. And the biggest one, college degree, was even 20 years ago, and it swung 28 points toward the Democrats. Of Republicans, people who have a college degree are much more likely to be Democrats than Republicans, and vice versa. So the 18 to 50-year-olds are 54% of the state population. Women are 53% of the voters. King County is 30% of the state electorate. Education, 41% of the state of Washington has a bachelor's degree. But in rural counties, it's 15% have a bachelor's degree. In King County, it's 40%. That was in 2000. Now, 25% in rural, 55% in King County have bachelor's degrees. In Seattle, 70% have bachelor's degrees, a difference of 45%. And college degree has become the best indicator of political or party identification and voting patterns since the Trumpazine. So, as I said, the parties used to be these big tents. As the parties have sorted ideologically, the populist wings of each party has asserted more influence. They've come to form more of the base of the parties instead of the wings, which has resulted in a moving of the center of both national parties, the center of gravity, away from what used to be the middle. and away from where a lot of voters still are. So identification is reinforced and is reinforced by shared information. Knowledge becomes not facts as we normally define them, but the shared beliefs of a group. That becomes knowledge. Patrick Moynihan famously said, "You are entitled to your own opinion, but not to your own facts." That statement now seems just quaint. Observation, social science, and neuroscience shows us that acceptance of shared beliefs solidifies group cohesion. The more beliefs you share, the stronger you feel a part of the group, and it changes opinion. So I identify with the party based on my identity and some shared values. Then I adopt the party positions based on the issues. So partisans shift their opinions to match the dominant views of the group. A party is brought together by shared shared identity. It's held together by sharing beliefs. So Republicans and Democrats trade positions on the budget deficit, on Russia, on the FBI, on the economy, on whether the sky is blue, depending on which party's in the White House. Loyalty is demonstrated by beliefs. The more outrageous the so-called fact, the stronger your loyalty is demonstrated by professing it. Not a single Trump cabinet nominee would deny under oath that the 2020 election was stolen. We have entered an era of performative politics where politicians take outrageous stands in order to fundraise and keep the base voters stirred up. And it doesn't really matter if they believe what they're saying. The manufactured debate stokes outrage, fear, and loathing around symbolic issues in order to energize the base. So we're finding ourselves arguing about the racism of math books and the war on Christmas and gender pronouns and immigrants eating pets and whatever woke means, instead of the issues that people mostly care about. So as politicians exploit and emphasize these differences, the parties become more tribal. It becomes more us versus them, which is a powerful psychological trigger. And the toxic aspect of tribal parties is the demonization of the other party, which we talked about getting introduced in the 90s. Us versus them reinforces negative partisanship. I identify as much by what I am not as what I am. What used to be worthy opponents are now dangerous traitors. I may or may not love my candidate, but I hate yours. In the last, in a poll in 2020, this going back a bit, but this illustrates a poll I did in October of the 2020 election. 9 out of 10 of my respondents in each party considered the opponent's candidate a danger to democracy. Not a bad candidate or doesn't agree with me, a danger to democracy. In my last poll before the 2024 election, 50% of the Harris voters said that keeping Trump out of the White House was more important than putting Harris in the White House. And it goes deeper. In 2022, 72% of the Republicans and Democrats said that 72% of Republicans said Democrats were immoral. And 63% of the Democrats said the same of the Republicans. And those numbers were up by 25 points on each side since 2016. 2016, what happened that year? A Pew study of global attitudes conducted a survey of 24 countries and found that in the United States, a 53% majority thought that most people, their morality was bad. Their fellow citizens were not moral people. There was only one of 24 countries where there's a majority that said that. In Canada, 92% said my fellow citizens are moral people, are good. Tactically, this has led to an end justifies the means kind of politics, where the other side is out to destroy America, which we think they are, then anything goes to stop them. We have a moral imperative to do everything we can to stop them, even if we have to bend the rules ourselves. So the things we thought were taboo or political third rails turn out to be not only taboo, but they are powerful generators of political energy and support. What holds democracy together is not laws so much as mores and norms, accepted practices that citizens and leaders observe. It's not possible to enforce every law all the time, and it's not possible to legislate everything that needs to be governed. We depend on norms. The founders believed that democracy depended on the virtue of citizens. And by virtue, they meant behaving in ways that promoted the greater good. Chief among these were these virtues were trust and tolerance and forbearance. You don't do or say everything you are not prohibited by law from doing. You wait for the light to turn, even if there are no cars coming, before you go into the crosswalk. You pay your taxes, even though the chances of getting busted are very low. When norms and you accept election results. When norms are no longer enforced, the laws themselves alone cannot hold society together. So, today's politics is organized around identity and values. Our government is organized around geography and by geography, states, districts, counties, and so on. Changing the subject here, as you can tell. The changes in partisanship have changed the Washington political map. For years, we talked about the Cascade Curtain. This is the standard sort of map we use for years. All blue on the western side of the state, all Republican on the eastern side of the state, except for Lewis County there, which I always thought of as Republicans giving the finger to Western Washington. They just look like it. But we used that model for years. And as you can see, if we had an electoral college by county, the Republicans would be winning everything. But by 2024, that map had changed. This one's an eye test. So the first column is the 2008 election for president, senate, and governor. Second column is 2016. The third column is 2020. And the last column is 2024. The yellow numbers are the Democratic vote totals, or vote percentages for that year. So, and that classic that classic Cascade Curtain is that Senate column in the middle in the first column. Patty Murray got 55% of the vote in 2004, carrying those counties. So Dan Evans won in 1964, carrying 33 counties. Ronald Reagan got 56% of the vote, carrying 34 counties. Donald Trump got 39% of the vote in 2020 and 2024. In 2016 is where things changed. When Trump came on the scene, he flipped The coastal counties, Grace Harbor, Pacific, Grace Harbor, my old stomping grounds, Pacific, Cowlitz. Grace Harbor County had not voted for a Republican for president since Herbert Hoover. And that worked out real well for them, so they decided they'd try it again, and they voted for Trump. And they've been voting Republican ever since. So the map has gone from east-west to urban-rural, and it's reflective of the national map, where the urban areas, the most populated cities, the states, the coastal counties are blue, the interiors are red. But notice the similarities here. The only change from 2016 to 2020 on those two maps is one county change, and that was Clallam County went from red to blue. No other county changed. 7 legislative districts out of 49 switched. From 2020 to 2024, no county switched, and only one legislative district changed, and that was only by 300 votes. Kamala Harris, Bob Ferguson, and Cantwell won the same 13 counties in 2024 that Inslee, Murray, and Biden had won in their elections the year before, and they got pretty much the same vote. And in those 13 counties that the Democrats win now are the 9 most highly educated counties in the state and the 7 most high income counties in the state. Bill Bishop wrote a great book in 2008 called The Big Sort, which chronicled how people are voting with their feet across the countries, moving to areas more aligned with their political views. So the red areas are becoming redder, the blue areas are becoming bluer. In 2020 and 24, of the 435 congressional districts across the country, only 16 voted for one party for Congress and a different party for president. There was a time in Washington state where that was the norm. And there was only one of those was in Washington, and that was 3rd District, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez. The Idaho Secretary of State did a study just a few years ago of the 20,000 people who had moved, most recently had moved from Washington to Idaho. 62% of them registered as Republican when they got there. In California, it was 80% of the Californians who moved to Idaho registered as Republicans when they got there. Oh, it shows up well. This map is Washington State population. This is down to household level, red and blue by household level. It shows a number of things. One shows you where the population is, shows you where all those red counties don't have many people in them, and so this is the real distribution of the state. So it looks different than the county maps. Here's the thing: 60% of the state voters live inside that circle, which is where we are. Scoop Jackson used to say, way back then, I can see all the votes I need from the top of the Space Needle. And it's even more accurate now. And we have the Columbia Center now, so he can get some votes from Skagit County too. So here's this is fun. So here's Spokane County. Spokane County is 8% of the state's population. As you can see, it's pretty scattered, red and blue throughout the county. Except right in the middle there where it says Spokane, that's the city of Spokane. There's a concentration of blue. So the city of Spokane sends, every legislative district sends 3 legislators to the state legislature. City of Spokane sends 3 Democrats. They all live right there. The rest of Spokane County sends 15 Republicans. 15 Republicans have part of their district in King County. Here's Seattle. So there's a Republican not far from here. We can go visit him after the meeting and talk some sense into him. I know the problem. So you see, the thing is that people in Seattle just don't run into any Republicans at the Safeway. They aren't here. to any huge numbers. I'm sure people here can remember when Seattle was mostly Republican legislative delegation. Evans and Gorton came from here. Joe McGavick, Mary Ellen McCaffrey, John Murray, George Clark, Paul Crobble, Scotty Blair, Lois North, others. There was a majority, if not all of them, were Seattle, and that has changed in the last 2 generations. So the big sort shows up in the legislature. So here was the distribution of the legislature in 1980. So as I say, three per district, 49 districts. There were 20 districts that had a member of their delegation, at least one member from each party. And 13 all Ds, 16 all Republicans. By 2020, it was down to 4 purple districts. And as a matter of fact, now there are 3. So as a consequence of this, there are no Republican legislators in King County. I think there actually is 1 or 2 that have a sliver of eastern rural King County in the district. And no Democrats in eastern Washington outside of those 3 from the city of Spokane. So when the Republican caucus meets to discuss their bills in the legislature, there's no King County voice in that caucus. When the when the Democrats meet, there's no Republican. I did that wrong. There's no Republican. No Republican in the King County caucus, no Democrat, and when Eastern Washington meets, there are no Democrats except those 3 lone voices from the city of Spokane. So the most profound aspect of this big sort of people moving to people, to be around people like them, that's not new. That's understandable. It's the consequences of that sorting, which is this big sort, which means more single-party districts. In a one-party district, no one's worried about getting beat by the other party. They're worried about being primaried. They're worried about getting beat by somebody in their own party. So if elected officials never have to appeal to voters of the other party, their ideology naturally is going to narrow because they're only talking to people in their own party. That's the only votes they need. And they're worried about, so the Republicans are looking over their right shoulder and the Democrats are looking over their left shoulder all the time. So that creates a disincentive for representatives from single party districts, which we have almost all, to compromise with the other party because they'll get primaried. And as we have seen, these geographical trends encapsulate ideological characteristics, values, and identity differences, thus intensifying the party divide and hardening the boundaries between the parties. Well, thank you very much. We'll leave it to you. Where is this headed? The quick answer is we don't know. We're in the midst of, if I had $1 for every time I heard or uttered the phrase uncharted waters in the last 10 years, I'd be on my yacht right now in some of those waters. Nationally, it's an understatement to say we're in the time of turmoil and change. We're an evenly divided nation politically, with internal divisions in both parties. Donald Trump has been the unifying force for both parties. He will be out of office in 1,046 days and 12 hours. But who's counting? The midterms are on the horizon. Trump is losing popularity, but the national Democrats are less popular than the Republicans in national polls. So it's going to come down to all these local races. So let's look at Washington State. Washington, as we've seen, has been a Democrat redoubt in the national inaction, the West Coast, but Washington as much or more than any. We used to think that Washington was at least somewhat immune from the excesses and the currents of national politics. But to turn Tip O'Neill's old maxim on his head and to contradict what Joel said in his column this week, all politics is national now. In a survey in the midst of last year's legislative session, in the midst of the session, I did a survey and I asked Washington voters what was the topic of their most recent conversation. And 70% of them had been in a conversation in at least the last 48 hours about politics, government, and so on. Only 10% mentioned anything about Washington State in an open question. 72% said something about Trump. And the Democratic Party makes sure in these midterms that are coming that every Republican candidate's middle name is Trump. And it's been working. So the session's coming to an end. So how will voters respond to the things that the Democratic-controlled legislature and the Democratic governor signed? We may have looks like we'll have this income tax coming out, some other things, parental consent. We'll have initiatives on the ballot. How are voters going to respond to those? This is when I start to get, this time of year when pollster like me starts to get twitchy, I want to get out there. How will Bob Ferguson be regarded? He got off to a rocky start. In a survey I did last year in July, which is 6 months into his first term, I've asked voters to rate governor's performance every 6 months since 1992. And so Ferguson his first 6 months was last July. He got the lowest ratings for the first 6 months of any governor since Mike Lowry, which is kind of mysterious actually, but there it is. And we don't know how he's done since. So it's not shaping up to be a good year for Republicans. Democrats are about one vote away from a supermajority in both houses, which means the Republicans are going to have to get permission to go to the bathroom if they get the supermajority. And can the Republicans somehow avoid this coming blue wave? And how do they do that when the political ecosphere is dominated by national politics? The Republicans in Washington have a catch-22 that I've been telling them about for years, and which they're probably aware of. They can't win without the MAGA voters, and they can't win with the MAGA issues. So that's the squeeze that they've been in for about the last decade. Nationally, the blue wave coming. Both parties have internal divisions that are playing out in primaries, most vividly in Texas, where both parties had hot contests between a more moderate centrist candidate and a more populist candidate on both sides. The Democrats, again, chose the more moderate candidate, which they typically have done. The Republicans are still trying to decide, which we'll see. But all eyes on Texas, because however that comes out, it may be the best bellwether this year for how things are going nationally, because the Latino vote swung toward Trump last time, seems to be moving away in the polls. Young men voted for Trump last time, seem to be moving away in the polls. There's 8 million black voters in Texas, so it looks like to me like a very good race to be keeping your eye on this year. But the midterm election is not going to resolve our current turmoil. You think of 3 scenarios. At most, the Democrats could control both houses of Congress. Then they try to reestablish congressional powers, put up some guardrails, curb executive powers. Trump can veto anything they pass and can ignore any law he doesn't like. and make up laws that don't get passed, which he's shown. So how does that play? Democrats could control the House, but not the Senate, which is the current betting favorite. So what do then? They pass bills that they know are not going anywhere just to make a statement and to lay down planks for their platform in 2028. Will they conduct investigations? I put $1 on that. Will they impeach Trump again? They're going to have some discussions about that. Will they impeach cabinet secretaries? They're going to have some very spirited discussions in that Democratic caucus about how to proceed if they get the majority. And the third scenario is Trump holds on to both houses of Congress, or the Republicans do. Trump will then be emboldened, and who knows where that will lead. Any of those three scenarios promises to be even more bitter and acrimonious than what we've seen so far. Isn't this cheery? That's the short term. In the long term, politics is not working for large segments of the population. The Founding Fathers designed a system of divided control with checks and balances, divided levels of government. It was designed to force deliberation and compromise. The Constitution is a framework for debate. That's what it is. Two things the founders were most wary of were democracy and strong parties. Well, political parties at all. Political parties were forming before George Washington even left office, and democracy has been expanding since the earliest days of the Republic. The founders anticipated a president like this, but I don't think they imagined a Congress quite like this that would lay down its first article powers in favor of the president. Party competition is necessary for a healthy democracy. In a society as large and as diverse as ours, parties bring together coalitions of interest and organize the choices for voters. Voters aren't walking around with complex ideologies and positions on every issue. The parties help them sort through that and arrive at a vote and achieve a majority vote, which is necessary for a democratic republic. But we now have evenly divided nation with two parties polarized along identity characteristics, which these dynamics are reshaping the future of our politics in ways we really can't anticipate. Our current politics works against compromise for several reinforcing angles, as I've talked about. So I expect the red and blue acrimony and the internal battles to continue into the foreseeable future. And I'd like to end on an optimistic note, but I just can't. No, but I am hopeful. I am hopeful. The country's been in worse situations before. And that doesn't mean we'll automatically get through this one. But every 50 years or so, we seem to go through a kind of identity crisis. And in those crises, we tend to focus on the country's weaknesses. That's what democracies do. You focus on the weakness, and maybe we can fix that. So the long road ahead, the current deadlock will dissipate once one of the two parties manages to expand their electoral coalition enough to win a governing majority. So the road ahead is the usual long road of persuasion and organization. But we're not going back to the country before Trump. Too many weaknesses have been exposed in our political systems for that to happen. We'll need to repair and adapt our political systems to align with 21st century realities and communication systems and the way people behave and act. The electoral system, the campaign finance system, the communication system, the financial system, the civil system, all need attention. But most of all, to do that work, we need to recultivate and nurture civic virtue and a shared vision of how America should work, so that even worthy opponents can work toward continuous improvement of this experiment of ours. Thank you. We have time for some questions, but no answers. No time for any answers.
Well, I think we'll follow our standard procedure, taking questions section by section, and Larry is going to handle the, how do I say it, the far right,
That's fitting.
if there is one here, and Michelle in the center, and I'll take this side. Ronnie, you're first over here.
Mr. Elway,
Yes.
I'm over here.
Oh, well, this way. Sorry. Hi.
Hi. I'd like to know how you go about polling in this day and age. I mean, it used to be by telephone. So
Yeah.
many people don't answer the phone now unless they know who's on the other end.
Right.
How do you get those numbers?
It's changing. Up until, well, I still, when I'm doing a statewide poll, I start with a list of registered voters and select a random sample of those and then call those. And sometimes if we don't have phone numbers for all of them, we will mail them and ask them to take the survey online. So we're doing a combination of landline, text. We text people and they take the survey online. Or we talk to them on their cell phone. The national polls find that harder to do. You can't get current list of registered voters from every state. So it's really changing. It's been random voting, a random calling by telephone exchange. Then you ask people a series of questions if they're going to vote. But that's even changing too, because as you say, people don't answer their telephones anymore. When I started this 50 years ago, we'd do a survey of 400 people. We would dial the phone maybe 4,000 times, and we call everybody back 3 times. Now to do that same 400, I have to call 40,000 dials. So the response rate is nil. So what's evolving is all those methods I just said, plus online panels. There are companies that are recruiting people to take surveys, and they'll have a survey. They'll have a panel of a million people, and I'll say I want a survey of people likely to vote in this primary, and they will have interviewed those people, so they know who they are. So they'll screen a sample of those people and send them the survey, and they take it online. But what that's changing is it's more like we're modeling the electorate now than sampling it, because it's not a random sample if those people are already agreed to take surveys and they know they're going to get a survey. So there's that's all changing, and the online surveys are doing very well in predicting elections and all that stuff. So we're catching up, but it's developing a whole new body of statistics to deal with that, to weight the samples and get. So I think if we're going to get into all those statistics, I think I'm going to be getting out of this business just in time. It's easier to just call people and record what they say. So it's getting more complicated and diverse. It's coming. It's right behind you.
Thank you. So when I get a survey from the Democratic Party, and at the end of it,
It's not a
they
survey.
give me an opportunity, shall we
Yes.
say, to donate.
Right.
Should I even bother?
Not unless you want to donate. And so if you donate and send that in, they'll have your $5 and they'll have your attitudes on all those questions. And they'll have all your demographic information. So when they want to send out a letter to all the rifle owners, you'll get, because you answered that, and specialize their mailing. So they're building their mailing list. That is not a survey.
But I mean, the survey, the statistics don't mean anything.
No.
Thank you.
They mean a lot to the Democratic Party or whoever's sending them out, but they aren't representative of the population. Oh no! Don't let Andy ask a question.
Right there.
I just want to say, I think it was a terrific talk. It was very clear, very comprehensive,
Thank you.
and I think you need to publish it. I think we need somehow to get out the word in this consistent way about what's happening and what the implications are. The implications you expressed at the end aren't new, but the data upon which they're based is organized in a very coherent way, and I think that's great. It's interesting to me, just one other comment, that the issues you're making about civic virtue at the end are almost word to word what David Brooks is now saying,
Yes.
and why he's left the New York Times.
Yes.
So I think there's lots of people who think we don't pitch the level here, we pitch the issue here,
Yeah.
and we figure out how to communicate it.
Yeah.
And I think this would be a very important contribution to the communication that needs to be made.
Thank you. Yeah. No, there's quite a movement about that, and I often get in conversations about, well, we need to teach civics in high school, and my first response is, can you imagine developing a civics curriculum in high school in today's environment? So you got to go about it some other way.
So Washington stands out for electing only Democratic governors longer than any other state, I believe.
Yes.
So there are states, for example, like Vermont and Massachusetts, which are equally Democratic as Washington, but which elect Republican governors. So do you think the Republicans in the state will ever be able to mount statewide candidates that could appeal? I mean, you said their problem, which is the rock and the hard place between the MAGAs and electability.
Yeah.
But do you think the Republicans in the state will have any capacity to evolve beyond that and offer statewide candidates that might appeal to people who don't believe that we should have a one-party state forever?
Yeah. Well, they have come close a couple of times. Dino Rossi came within 123 votes of beating Christine Gregoire, closest governor's race in the history of the United States. There have been other candidates since then, but then in between Rob McKenna and Dino Rossi, there's Lauren Culp. And when I talk to people in surveys or focus groups, they remember Lauren Culp. And they still remember Ellen Craswell, who was way back. But so it's hard to see how the candidates are there. But what's happening now, of course, is there aren't enough Republicans coming up. The legislature has fewer of them to build a base and an expertise. So it doesn't get any easier. But somehow, I think I've awakened every morning for the last 10 years waiting for this fever to break. And I don't think that's how it's going to happen exactly. It's going to be hard work. But I don't know. I get invited often to speak to the mainstream Republicans of Washington, sort of the non-MAGA Republicans, and I've been telling the same thing for years, and it's not like it's anything new. But I don't know.
We got a question over here.
Stuart, I was listening for the word vision, and you got it in the last paragraph.
Yeah.
So my training is that the head of any organization is responsible for holding the vision.
Yeah.
Is there a vision that we can tap into that every American really values, like integrity, fraternity?
Yeah.
What is the American vision to your thinking?
Yeah. Well, I think there's not going to be a vision. I mean, you could say that Donald Trump tapped into a vision. Barack Obama's strength was he tapped into a vision. He wasn't an experienced candidate. He'd been a state senator just a few years before, but he tapped into a vision. So there are those people, but there's the idea of a unifying vision has to be something like we agree to disagree, not my opponent is out to destroy America. It's the John McCain silencing that woman at the debate who was trashing Obama, and he said, no, ma'am, he's an honorable American. We need more of that. And it needs to be from all these leaders, all these people that are running, and so that the atmosphere change. I think what has been sort of unleashed here is sort of our, not our better angels, but our worser angels that have been given license by the current atmosphere. I can say things now that I couldn't say before. They were squelching my free speech. There was a CEO that was quoted in the paper saying, "God, I can finally say retard again." He was a Fortune 500. I can't remember what it was, and so that sort of moral visionary leadership does come from the top. But I don't think in this country it's going to come from one person, or at least I hope it doesn't, because if it's one person, then we're in an autocracy, and I don't. Where? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. In looking at your charts of all these one-party districts,
Yeah.
I saw a proposal to change the voting system so that there are more districts voting together, so
Yeah.
that there would be a few Republicans and maybe mostly Democrats
Yeah.
elected from that larger
Yeah,
district.
there are several sort of reforms like that. Ranked choice voting is one that could work. We went to this open primary, top two primary. So there are a lot of districts now where it's 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. And the idea was that the one best reflected that party would get elected, even though they're both Democrats or so on. Those are systematic changes that need to grind through the legislature and take place. There was something else lost there. I might think of it later. All right. But there are election reforms that might do that. Oh, I know. I was going to say, in both state and terms of Congress, if I could just wave a magic wand and make one change, I would make every district competitive instead of all these one-party districts. I mean, you can't do it because of the way people live. But if you could do that, there was not enough money in America to buy all those districts. So, and both parties would have to compete with both parties, and we'd have a more central politics, centrist.
Okay. Yes, you have sort of answered my question, but I noticed that there are a fair number of states where you have a Democrat elected to be the governor or the senator, and yet in the legislation of those states that's predominantly Republican, whenever you have things are division. So there'll be predominantly Republican congressmen, predominantly Republican legislatures. Do you think is this just gerrymandering? And I can't think of any exceptions where you might have a Republican governor or senator and a predominantly Democrat legislature or congressional group.
I say there's 3 states in the country with that kind of balance. The states can't be gerrymandered, but all the other districts can. So, and counties can't be gerrymandered. That's why these red and blue counties. But the legislative or congressional districts, those lines can move. And as we've seen, that's become even more. It's always been a political game, but now we're doing it every year in Texas, and California follows. And so is that going to be it from now on? We change those rules every time. But we're to the point, as I mentioned here, there are 41 states that have uniform party control, top to bottom. Texas, which I pointed to, hasn't elected a Republican statewide office, any statewide office, a Democrat. I always do that. A Democrat since 1964. So, Talicro, what's his name? He's going to have an uphill battle. Tallarico. He's new.
We probably have time for one more question. Anybody? Going once?
Over there.
Where? Oh, Ronnie.
I did this once. It was in a round, and I was in the middle, and everybody was all around, and to get the mic, and they'd say, "Over here." And I say, "That doesn't help me," because I'm looking around.
This is more of a comment than a question. I moved here from Oregon, and I think for quite some time, the statewide positions were Democratic while the legislature had a Republican majority.
In Oregon. Yes.
And one of the differences is that in Oregon, the Senate district is divided in half with 2 representatives in that Senate district, so that you can have a Senate district that votes Democratic, but the 2 legislative positions are Republican and Democratic.
Interesting.
And that would make a difference here.
Yeah.
That's part of the possible reforms.
All right. Well, Stuart, thank you. That was a terrific presentation. Our next speaker in April, and I will confirm the date, will be the former University of Washington president, Anna Marie Kaus.
Great.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.